She almost did not come. Nyla Bennett had been sitting at her kitchen table in Atlanta 3 nights before the trip, staring at an unfinished project report on her laptop screen, seriously considering sending a text to cancel. The girls would understand. They always did. Work was work. And Nyla was always the responsible one, the steady one, the one who put everything else before herself without even noticing she was doing it. But Eden had called her at 11 that night. Not texted. Called. Nyla, if you cancel this trip, I will personally drive to Atlanta and remove that laptop from your hands. We have been planning this for 2 years. 2 years. You are getting on that plane. So Nyla packed a simple black carry-on, booked an early flight, and arrived at the Siesta Key villa last, stepping out of a rideshare with her single bag while the others were already somewhere inside, making noise loud enough to carry through the open glass doors. The villa was stunning in the way that made you stop walking just to look at it. Floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the light and held it like something precious. A private stretch of beach that belonged only to their little group. An infinity pool that seemed to pour directly into the ocean beyond it. White curtains so soft they moved with the smallest breath of wind coming off the water. Nyla stood there for a moment with her bag on her shoulder and let herself feel something close to relief. Maybe she had needed this more than she realized. Tasha spotted her first from the balcony. Nyla Bennett finally showed up, she screamed, holding a bottle of champagne in one hand and waving dramatically with the other. Nyla smiled. Not the polite social smile she used at work. The real one. The one that only came out around people who knew her. Inside, Camille was mid-live stream in a white bikini top and flowing cover-up, talking to her phone like it was a person seated across from her. Eden was on her 3rd call with her fiancé Raymond, tucked into the corner of the kitchen, voice low and tense in the way that meant the conversation was not going well. Simone had already changed into comfortable clothes and found the most peaceful corner of the villa, feet propped up, eyes halfway closed. They were exactly themselves. All 5 of them. No performance required. That first night was perfect. Dinner on the private patio, the ocean in front of them turning colors as the sun dropped. Laughter so loud the neighboring villas could probably hear every word. Old stories that became funnier with distance. Inside jokes that still landed perfectly after years of growing up and growing apart. Nyla went to bed that night feeling something she had forgotten the name of. Lightness. She woke early the next morning before anyone else was moving. That was her habit. The house quiet around her, ocean sound coming through the cracked balcony door, coffee made carefully because Tasha had somehow purchased the wrong filters, but Nyla had found a way to make it work anyway. She took her cup outside and sat near the water's edge while the sky was still doing that soft orange and pink thing it does before the sun fully commits to rising. She did not see him that morning. But she noticed the neighboring villa was occupied. One light on upstairs. Someone already awake, same as her. She did not think much about it. The second day brought a beach excursion organized by the resort, and by afternoon the women were sunbathing, laughing, and ordering things from the beachside bar while Camille filmed content and Tasha made friends with every stranger within 20 feet. That was when they first saw him. He came down the private path from the neighboring villa in the kind of effortless way that made people look twice. Dark linen trousers rolled to the ankle. A simple white shirt. Sunglasses. He was not performing anything. He was just walking to the water, document folder tucked under one arm, phone in the other hand. And everyone noticed. The resort staff noticed first, the way bodies quietly rearranged themselves around important people without anyone giving a signal. Then 2 women from a different section of the beach started leaning toward each other and speaking behind their hands. Then Tasha sat up from her lounger so fast she nearly knocked over her drink. "Who," she said slowly, "is that?" Camille had already removed her sunglasses to get a better look. "I don't know," she said. "But I'm about to find out." Eden looked up from her phone long enough to assess him and raise one perfectly shaped eyebrow. Simone shielded her eyes from the sun and watched him for a moment before settling back. Nyla glanced over, registered that the neighboring villa was occupied by an attractive man with good posture, and returned to her book. That was it for her. That was the full extent of her interest. The resort manager, a cheerful and extremely organized woman named Patricia, approached their group that afternoon to mention that she had arranged a small welcome dinner on the beach for guests staying in the premium villas. It was a complimentary gesture, she explained. A few guests, excellent food, oceanfront setting. Tasha immediately said yes for all of them before anyone could consider otherwise. The dinner that evening was set beautifully. Long table right on the sand. Soft lighting. The sound of waves moving underneath every conversation. There were 8 guests in total, which meant the group was intimate enough that ignoring anyone felt deliberate. His name was Kang Min-jae. Patricia introduced him simply as a hotel investor currently exploring properties along the Florida Gulf Coast. But the way she said it and the way he received it told anyone paying attention that investor was doing a great deal of understated work in that sentence. He was 36, quietly Korean in a way that felt deliberate about not explaining itself, and he had the kind of stillness around him that comes not from shyness, but from being entirely comfortable in any room. Camille introduced herself first. Warmly, confidently, hand extended with the practiced ease of a woman who understood how to make an impression. Min-jae was gracious, polite, genuinely pleasant, but not hooked. Camille noticed immediately, and she was too competitive to let it register visibly, so she simply turned the warmth up a degree and kept moving. Eden found a natural opening in a conversation about overseas business expansion and slipped into it smoothly, voice softening in the way it did when she wanted to seem approachable rather than impressive. Simone asked precise and intelligent questions about South Korean hospitality markets, and Min-jae answered them with genuine interest. Nyla sat near the middle of the table and ate her food and listened to the conversation move around her. She was not being rude. She was not performing disinterest. She was simply not someone who spoke unless she had something worth saying. Then, near the end of dinner, one of the servers, an older woman whose feet were clearly bothering her after a long shift, reached across to collect a large serving dish and misjudged the weight of it. It slipped. Not catastrophically. But 2 smaller plates and a handful of cutlery went with it. Everyone at the table froze for a half-second in that social way, deciding whether to react or pretend it had not happened. Nyla was already out of her chair. Not dramatically. Not loudly. She just moved, crouching down next to the woman before anyone else had finished deciding how to respond, helping gather the pieces, speaking quietly to her, something that made the server laugh softly with relief instead of continuing to look mortified. Then Nyla returned to her seat, picked up her fork, and continued eating like nothing remarkable had happened. The conversation resumed around the table, but Min-jae had stopped participating in it. He was watching Nyla instead. Not conspicuously. Not in the way that would draw attention. But his eyes had moved away from the discussion happening directly in front of him and settled somewhere more interesting. He stayed there longer than was subtle. Tasha saw it from across the table and almost choked on her water. She pressed her foot sideways against Camille's under the table. Camille looked up, followed Tasha's very subtle eyeline, and the expression that moved across her face lasted less than a second before she smoothed it away completely. But Tasha had caught it and filed it away. The next 3 days moved in the rhythm of vacation. Late mornings, long lunches, beach time, dinners that stretched well past midnight. Camille posted everything. Eden argued on the phone with Raymond twice and pretended she had not. Tasha befriended a neighboring family from Houston and started getting invited to their barbecues. Simone slept more than she had in months and looked genuinely restored by it. Nyla read 4 chapters of a novel every morning before the others woke up. She also, on the 3rd morning, went to find coffee at a small cafe near the marina because the villa's espresso machine was making a sound that concerned her, and Tasha had somehow lost the instruction manual the same day they arrived. The cafe was small and unhurried. Wooden floors, ceiling fans, the smell of good coffee and something baking. Min-jae was already there. He was at a corner table with a tablet propped open and a half-finished espresso beside it. He looked up when she walked in, and for a moment neither of them said anything. Then he nodded at her in the recognizing a neighbor way and returned to his screen. Nyla ordered her coffee and found a table near the window. They sat in separate silences for about 12 minutes. Then he said, without looking up from his tablet, "The espresso machine at the villa is making a strange noise too." She looked over. "That is somehow very reassuring." "It is not reassuring at all. I am simply saying we are equally inconvenienced." She almost smiled. "Do you always try to comfort people this way?" "I was not trying to comfort you." He looked up then. "I was complaining." She did smile that time. The real one. They talked for 40 minutes without planning to. About nothing significant at first. The marina. The heat. A book she was reading that he had heard of but never opened. A project he was working on that he described in deliberately vague terms that she did not push against. She did not ask him how much anything cost, or how many properties he owned, or which celebrities he knew. She asked him whether he had tried the fish tacos from the place down the road that the resort staff kept recommending. He had not. She said they were apparently extraordinary. He said he would consider it. She finished her coffee, said it was nice to see him, picked up her bag, and left. He stayed at the table for another few minutes after she walked out. Then he closed his tablet without finishing the document he had been reviewing. After that, they kept finding each other in the small spaces between the noise. The stretch of beach before the resort guests came out in the morning, when it was quiet enough to hear the water properly. The fruit stand near the resort entrance where Nyla went every other day, and Min-jae had apparently developed the same habit. The long balconies of their neighboring villas that faced the same ocean, late at night when the parties inside had worn everyone else down. One evening they talked across the balcony railing for almost 2 hours. About family. About what success looked like from the inside versus how it appeared from outside. About the specific exhaustion of being the person everyone else depended on. About loneliness as something that can exist even in a full room. Nyla said things to him that night she had not said out loud to anyone in a long time. Not because he had done anything to earn them, but because he listened without waiting for his turn to speak, and that was rarer than it should have been. Back inside the villa, things were shifting. Camille had not said anything directly. She was too controlled for that. But the energy around her changed whenever someone mentioned Min-jae's name. She laughed a little too quickly, changed the subject with a little too much ease. And once, when Tasha pointed out that Min-jae had waved specifically at Nyla from across the beach that afternoon, Camille stood up from the table and went to refill her drink even though her glass was still half full. Eden was more transparent about it. "He's looking for a wife," she said one afternoon in the way that was supposed to sound like a warning. Men like that always have a specific type in mind. And it's never the woman who's easiest to talk to. Nyla looked at her calmly. "I'm not trying to be anyone's wife, Eden." "I know," Eden said. "I'm just saying." Simone waited until they were alone one morning to say what she actually thought. "Be careful, New York. Not because he's a bad person. I don't think he is. But powerful men shift the ground around them without meaning to. And you've worked too hard for your stability to let someone else's orbit disrupt it." Nyla appreciated that one. Simone spoke from experience, not jealousy, and the difference mattered. Tasha, as expected, took a completely different position. "He looks at you like you're the only interesting thing in the room," she said cheerfully, "and you walk around completely unbothered, which is honestly making him more interested, and I'm living for every second of this." Nyla told her to stop. Tasha did not stop. The yacht party happened on the 5th evening. One of Min-jae's business partners, a loud and self-satisfied man named Gerald Ford, had chartered a private yacht for the night and extended the invitation to their group as part of ongoing resort hospitality. The yacht was enormous and beautiful and full of people who were very aware of both those things. The women dressed up. All 5 of them. Camille in something gold that caught light from 3 directions. Eden in deep green that made the most of every angle. Simone in structured black that looked architectural. Tasha in bright orange that matched her energy perfectly. Nyla wore a dark burgundy dress she had almost left at home because it felt too formal for a beach vacation. It was not excessive, but it fit her in the precise way that made it look like it had been made specifically for her. They arrived to music and champagne and the gentle motion of deep water. Gerald was the kind of host who made every compliment feel like a small transaction. He told Camille her social presence was remarkable and immediately asked how many followers she had. He asked Eden about her fiancé's business before he finished introducing himself. He told Simone she was very articulate, which Simone received with the flat smile of a woman who had been receiving that particular compliment for 20 years and had long since understood what it was actually saying. When he got to Nyla, he paused. "And you," he said, looking her over in the specific way that men like Gerald looked at women they could not immediately categorize. "What is it that you do?" "I work in urban planning," she said. He smiled. "So not quite in the same world as the rest of your friends." There was a pause. Not a dramatic one. Just the small beat of air that follows something that has been said in a way that cannot fully be taken back. "She's the one who actually changes cities," Tasha said immediately, voice perfectly pleasant, but eyes like flint. Gerald laughed in the way that men laugh when they want to dilute something without acknowledging it. He turned to include Minjae in the next comment, some remark about talent being relative to industry, and his voice had the tone of someone who expected to be agreed with. Minjae set down his glass. He did not raise his voice. He did not shift his posture dramatically. He did not make a scene in any way that Gerald could later describe as confrontational. He simply looked at Gerald directly and said, "The work Nyla does shapes the physical experience of communities for generations. That is not a narrow world. That is one of the more significant ones." And then he picked his glass back up and resumed the previous conversation as though nothing needed to be added. The table went completely quiet. Not because of anger. Because of precision. Because every person sitting there understood, without needing it explained, that Minjae had not defended Nyla in the way someone defends a person they feel sorry for. He had corrected Gerald the way you correct something when you have a genuine understanding of its value. Gerald moved on quickly and spent the rest of the evening being very enthusiastic about everything. But the rest of the table had processed what happened. Especially Camille. She was quiet for the remainder of the boat ride. Perfectly composed, still engaging, still present. But Tasha watched her from across the deck and understood that something had settled inside Camille that would not be comfortable when they got back to the villa. Nyla herself did not say anything about it directly to Minjae that night. She found him on the upper deck near the end of the evening, both of them looking at the same stretch of dark water. "You did not have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. "I am capable of handling Gerald on my own. I also know that." He glanced at her. "I said what I said because it was accurate. Not because I thought you needed protecting." She looked at him for a moment. "That is a very specific distinction. It is an important one." She turned back to the water. He stayed where he was. They were not touching. They were not saying anything romantic. They were simply standing in the same direction, and that felt, somehow, like more than it should have. Inside the lower deck, Eden had gone quiet and was texting Raymond with the focused urgency of someone who needed to feel anchored to something familiar. Simone was watching Nyla and Minjae through the upper deck window and thinking things she would not say tonight. Tasha was dancing and pretending she had not noticed where Nyla had disappeared to. Camille was at the bar. Second drink in hand. Looking at nothing. When they got back to the villa that night, the energy was different. Not explosive. Not an argument. Just the specific heaviness of something that had been circling for days finally landing in the room with everyone. Camille waited until the others had drifted toward their rooms. Then she sat on the couch across from Nyla, who had come back to close the balcony doors before bed. "I just want to say something," Camille started, voice careful and controlled. "Okay," Nyla said. "I'm not jealous." She said it in the way that people say things they are still in the process of deciding whether they believe. "I just think you should be aware of what this looks like from the outside." "What does it look like?" Nyla asked. Camille paused. "Like you're not telling us everything." Nyla looked at her steadily. "There is nothing to tell. We have talked. That is all." "He defended you in front of Gerald's entire table, Nyla." He made a factual correction. Men like Minjae do not make factual corrections for women they are not invested in. Camille's voice did not break, but something behind it shifted. "You know that." Nyla sat down across from her. Not defensively. Not with distance. "Camille. Are you telling me this as a friend or as someone who is upset? Camille opened her mouth, closed it. Then, quietly, maybe both. They sat there for a moment in the dark ocean sound coming through the glass, 5 successful women in their 30s in a beautiful villa where something had quietly complicated itself without anyone planning for it. I'm not trying to take anything from you, Nyla said finally. I know, Camille said. And somehow the way she said it made it clear that she understood the problem was never about taking. It was about the fact that Nyla was not trying at all, and that was the part that Camille, who tried at everything, could not make sense of. She went to bed without saying goodnight. Nyla stayed on the couch for a while longer, listening to the water. She thought about what Simone had said, about powerful men and shifting ground and hard-built stability. She thought about 2 hours on a balcony talking to someone who listened without waiting to speak. She thought about the 5th day of a 7-day vacation and everything that was supposed to be simple about it. Outside, through the glass, the ocean kept moving. Indifferent. Beautiful. Entirely unbothered by any of it. The morning after the yacht party, nobody woke up early. Not even Nyla. She had stayed on that couch longer than she intended, listening to the water outside and thinking thoughts she kept trying to organize into something sensible. By the time she finally went to bed, the sky was already doing that quiet thing it does around 4 in the morning, not quite dark anymore, but not ready to admit it was becoming light either. She slept heavily and woke up to the sound of Tasha in the kitchen aggressively trying to make breakfast and failing in a way that involved at least 2 separate smoke alarms. I just wanted eggs, Tasha announced to no one in particular when Nyla appeared in the doorway. Simple eggs. This villa has betrayed me personally. Nyla moved her gently aside, turned the heat down, and salvaged what could be saved. They ate together quietly, just the 2 of them, while the others slept. Tasha was uncharacteristically still. She ate her eggs and looked at the ocean through the glass, and let the silence sit without filling it, which was how Nyla knew something was being considered carefully. Finally, Tasha said, "How are you actually doing?" Not with the teasing energy from the days before. The real question. The one that meant she had been paying attention and was now asking with both hands open. Nyla thought about it honestly. I don't know, she said. That's fair, Tasha said. Last night was a lot. Last night was fine. Nyla. Tasha. They looked at each other. He likes you, Tasha said. Like, genuinely. Not in the way men like women they want something quick from. In the way that is actually a little bit terrifying because it looks like the beginning of something serious. Nyla set her fork down. We have 6 conversations and a balcony to his name. That is not serious. The way he looked at you on that boat was serious. Tasha said it without drama, which made it land harder than drama would have. And the way Camille came home and went straight for the wine was serious. And the way you stayed up on that couch alone for 2 hours instead of sleeping is serious. Nyla did not answer that. Tasha reached across the table and put her hand over Nyla's briefly. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying don't shrink it down to nothing because you're scared of what it might be. Nyla looked at her. When did you get wise? I've always been wise, Tasha said, already returning to normal. I just package it inside chaos so people don't get suspicious. Nyla smiled. The real one. They finished breakfast and cleaned up before anyone else appeared. The 6th day of the trip was supposed to be a group activity. A kayaking excursion had been planned weeks in advance, something physical and fun, a reason to be in the water and move their bodies instead of just lounging. It was on the shared itinerary that Eden had built with color-coded details because Eden planned group trips the way she managed everything, with total control and extensive documentation. But by mid-morning it was clear that not everyone was going. Camille said her shoulder was bothering her, which may have been true and may have been the most comfortable available exit. Eden had a call with Raymond that turned into a conversation that turned into an argument that she took behind the closed door of her room, voice low and tense through the wall. Simone looked at the kayaking description, looked at the heat index on her phone, looked at the kayaking description again, and wordlessly relocated to the pool with a novel and a large hat. That left Nyla and Tasha. They went anyway. The kayaking spot was a calm stretch of water tucked between mangroves about 2 miles from the resort, accessible by a short shuttle the resort arranged. The guide was a cheerful young man from Bradenton who clearly loved his job and talked constantly in a way that Tasha matched effortlessly, while Nyla paddled and listened and felt her shoulders a knot for the first time in days. The water was extraordinary. Green and clear and completely still in certain stretches, the kind of water that showed you the bottom and made the world feel very simple. On the way back to the resort, the shuttle passed the private beach. And Nyla saw Minjae. He was sitting on the sand near his villa's private access point, not on a lounger, just directly on the sand, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking at the water. He was not on his phone. He was not reviewing documents. He was just sitting there like someone who had needed to stop moving and had found the nearest available place to do it. He looked like someone who was very tired in the part of himself that rest does not reach. She recognized it immediately because she knew that feeling from the inside. Back at the villa, the afternoon fractured into separate silences. Eden emerged from her room with swollen eyes she had clearly spent effort concealing and announced she was fine in the tone that meant please do not ask. Tasha brought her tea without being asked and sat beside her on the couch and put on a comfort show at low volume, which was exactly right. Camille was on the balcony filming content with the focused energy of someone who was using productivity as a container for something else. The camera made her radiant and confident and untouchable, which was what it was supposed to do. Simone found Nyla on the lower patio near the pool and sat across from her with 2 cold drinks and the expression of a woman who had been thinking for several hours. "Can I say something without you getting defensive?" Simone asked. "You always say that before saying something that will make me defensive," Nyla pointed out. "That's because the things worth saying usually require some defense to get through." Simone leaned forward. "I told you to be careful. I stand by that. But I also think I framed it wrong." Nyla waited. "I said be careful because I was thinking about what he could disrupt. His money, his world, the way powerful men pull everything into their gravity." Simone paused. "But I wasn't thinking about what you might be walking away from because you were too busy protecting your stability to let anything new touch it." Nyla looked at her. "New York, when was the last time someone made you feel like the most important person in a room full of people who were all competing to be seen?" The question sat between them in the warm Florida air. Nyla did not answer it. She did not need to. The answer was visible. Simone nodded slowly. "I'm not telling you to fall in love with the man. I'm just telling you to stop treating your own feelings like they're a threat to be managed." After she left, Nyla sat alone for a long time. He knocked on the villa's front door at 6:30 that evening. Not the side gate. The front door. Formally. In a way that was deliberate and clear. Tasha answered it because Tasha was always closest to any door, some instinct she had developed over years of never wanting to miss anything. Minjae stood there in dark trousers and a fitted charcoal shirt, holding nothing, which somehow made the visit feel more significant than if he had brought something. "I was hoping to speak with Nyla," he said. "If that is convenient." Tasha turned and looked directly down the hallway toward where Nyla was sitting at the dining table with her book, who had clearly heard every word and was now sitting very still. "NYLA," Tasha announced at a volume that was entirely unnecessary given the size of the villa. "Someone is here for you." Nyla closed her book. She walked to the door. Minjae looked at her the way he had been looking at her for 6 days, like she was something he was still trying to fully understand and was in no rush to stop trying. "Would you walk with me?" he asked. Behind Nyla, somewhere in the depths of the villa, a door opened quietly. She did not need to turn around to know that at least 3 people were now within listening range. "Yes," she said. She stepped outside. They walked the stretch of private beach that belonged to both their villas, the sky above them doing its evening performance of color, the water pulling softly at the sand near their feet. For the first few minutes, neither of them said anything. It was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of 2 people who had learned, across a week of unexpected conversations, that they did not need to fill space with sound. He spoke first. "I leave Thursday morning," he said. Thursday was 2 days away. Their vacation ended Friday. "I know," she said. "I have a property meeting in Miami Thursday afternoon." then Seoul on Saturday. He paused. It is a full schedule. It sounds like it. He stopped walking. She stopped a step after him and turned. The water was moving behind him. The last light of evening was doing something very unfair to the angles of his face. Nyla, he said, and just her name in his voice, careful and direct, carried more weight than a long sentence would have. I am not someone who speaks without thinking. I don't say things to fill silence. You know that about me by now. I do, she said. Then you know that what I am about to say is something I have considered seriously. She waited. I would like to see you again after this week. Not at a resort event. Not by coincidence near a cafe or a fruit stand. Something that was almost a smile moved across his face briefly. Deliberately. With full awareness on both sides of what it is. The ocean moved behind him. Nyla looked at him steadily. The practical part of her brain was already running the list. Different countries. Different worlds. Different scales of living. The fact that her friends were almost certainly watching from the villa balconies right now with varying degrees of desperation. But underneath the list, something else. The balcony conversation at midnight about the loneliness that lives inside full rooms. The cafe table where he complained about an espresso machine and somehow it became 40 minutes of something real. The yacht deck where he said what he said about her work not because he felt sorry for her but because it was accurate, and he had decided accuracy mattered more than social ease. The way he listened. The way he stayed. Min-jae, she said. I need you to understand something about me. Tell me. I do not adjust myself for situations. I don't get quieter when things feel high pressure or more interesting when I think someone needs me to be. What you have seen this week is exactly who I am. There is no elevated version waiting somewhere behind this one. He held her gaze. I know that. A lot of men say they want that until they realize what it actually means in practice. I am not a lot of men, he said. Not arrogantly. Just factually, the same way he corrected Gerald on the yacht. As a statement of something he had already examined and confirmed. She studied his face for a moment. I live in Atlanta, she said. I am aware. You travel constantly. Also aware. This is not a simple situation. No, he said. It is not. I am not offering you simple. I am offering you deliberate. He paused. There is a difference. The waves moved. The sky deepened. Nyla Bennett, who had almost canceled this trip, who preferred peace over performance, who had spent an entire week being herself without apology and somehow ended up as the most interesting person in the room to the one man everyone else was trying to impress, stood on a private beach in Siesta Key at the end of a complicated and beautiful and entirely unexpected week. And she said, okay, just that. He did not react with excessive relief or celebration. He simply looked at her like something that had been slightly uncertain had now settled, and nodded once. Okay, he said back. They stood there a moment longer. Then she said, now I need to walk back before Tasha combusts from watching through binoculars. He actually laughed. Not politely. A real one. It changed his whole face. She had not heard that from him before. She liked it considerably. She walked back to the villa alone. Inside, she found all 4 women in the living room in configurations that were obviously the result of a very rapid and poorly disguised scramble from the balcony windows. Tasha was on the couch with her arms crossed, looking intensely casual. Simone was suddenly very interested in a magazine. Eden had appeared from her room with a glass of water she definitely did not need. Camille was standing near the kitchen island with a carefully neutral expression. Nyla looked at all 4 of them. You were watching, she said. We were in the living room, Tasha said immediately. From the balcony. The living room has a balcony. Nyla sat down in the armchair across from the couch and looked at her hands for a moment. Then she looked up. He wants to see me again after this week, she said. The room held its breath. Then Tasha made a sound that could only be described as contained explosion, a high-pitched compressed noise that she was clearly fighting to keep at a manageable volume. Simone set the magazine down. Eden put her water glass on the table. Camille stayed very still. And? Simone said. I said yes, Nyla said simply. Tasha fully gave up on containment. Eden's face moved through several expressions quickly and settled on something that looked like genuine happiness, making its way through complicated feelings to reach the surface. Simone nodded slowly, like something she had decided before the question was even asked had now been confirmed. And Camille. Camille was quiet for a long moment. Everyone in the room was aware of it. The specific weight of her silence. Then she crossed from the kitchen island and sat down on the end of the couch closest to Nyla's chair. She was not smiling, but she was not performing anything either. She looked like someone who had put something down that had been getting heavy. "I owe you an apology," she said. Nyla looked at her. "Not for having feelings," Camille continued. "I can't apologize for that, it happened. But for how I brought it to you. For making it about something it wasn't." She met Nyla's eyes directly. "I made it sound like you were hiding something from us. You weren't. You were just being yourself, and that was enough for him, and I think I was more bothered by that than I wanted to admit." The room was very quiet. "The truth is," Camille said, and her voice was slightly different now, something stripped of its usual performance, "I spend so much energy being visible. Making sure people see me. Building the image. And watching someone get chosen specifically because she wasn't doing any of that." She paused. "It made me ask some questions about myself that I wasn't ready for." Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Nyla leaned forward slightly and said, "You are one of the most extraordinary women I know, Camille. And not because of your following or your brand or how you look on camera. Because of who you are when the camera is off." She held her gaze. "I think you know her less than the rest of us do." Something moved across Camille's face. She did not cry. She was too composed for that. But she reached over and put her hand on Nyla's arm and squeezed once, and that said everything the words had been trying to get to. Tasha, who had been silent for approximately 45 seconds, which was a personal record, immediately said, "Okay, I need everyone to know I have been emotionally destroyed this evening, and I deserve a snack," which broke the tension into something manageable and warm. Eden laughed first. Then Simone. Then Camille, quietly. Then Nyla. They ordered food from the resort kitchen and ate on the patio with the ocean in front of them, the last full night of a trip that had started as one thing and become entirely another. They talked about real things. About Eden and Raymond and the fact that the constant arguing was starting to feel less like passion and more like a pattern that deserved a serious conversation. About Simone's exhaustion and the question of whether the career she had worked so hard for was actually making her happy or just making her impressive. About Camille and the distance between the woman her audience saw and the woman who sometimes sat alone after the stream ended and felt invisible. About Nyla, who had spent so long being the steady one, the responsible one, the one who put everything else first, that she had almost missed someone walking directly toward her. It was the most honest night of the trip. And it happened on the last one. Thursday morning. Nyla woke up before anyone else. Old habit. She made coffee and took it outside, sat near the water in the early quiet while the sky started its gradual conversation with the sun. She thought about Atlanta and her apartment and the project report that was still waiting on her laptop. She thought about Seoul and Miami and a full schedule. She thought about the specific unknowability of beginnings, how you can never see from the start what something will become. You can only decide whether the person standing in front of you is worth the uncertainty of finding out. She heard the neighboring villa's sliding door open. She did not look over. But after a moment she heard him walk down to the water's edge on his side of the low fence that separated their private beach sections. The sound of someone standing still near moving water. Then his voice, not loud, just carrying across the short distance, "I wanted to say goodbye properly." She looked over. He was standing there in travel clothes, bag visible through his open villa door. Ready to leave. But standing here first. "You have a flight," she said. "In 2 hours," he said. "I have time to say goodbye properly." She stood up from where she was sitting and walked to the low fence line. They stood on opposite sides of it, which felt, for a moment, like a metaphor neither of them was going to say out loud. "Thank you," he said, "for talking to me like a person." She considered that. "Most people don't? Most people talk to what they think I represent," he said. "You talk to me." He paused. "It has been a while since that happened." She looked at him steadily. You should want that in every room you walk into, not just on vacation. I know, he said. That is partly why I want to see you again. She nodded once. He reached into his jacket pocket and held out a card. Matte black. Just a number handwritten on the back. Not the company line, he said. The direct one. She took it. Their hands did not quite touch, but almost. I will call you, he said. I know, she said. And she did know. That was the thing about a man who spoke without filling silence. When he said something, it was because he had already decided it was true. She stood at the fence line and watched him go. Then she turned back to the ocean, coffee in hand, and stayed there until the others woke up. They left Friday morning. 5 women loading bags into separate cars, the villa behind them still beautiful, the ocean still indifferent and magnificent, the week folded now into memory. Tasha hugged Nyla for a long time at the departure point. You better keep us updated, she said into her shoulder. I need this story. I have invested emotionally and I require a return. Nyla told her she was ridiculous. Tasha said that was not a no. Eden hugged her next, quick and tight, and whispered, I'm calling Raymond when I get home to have the real conversation, which was the most important thing she had said all week. Simone held her by the shoulders and looked at her seriously. Stop managing your own heart like a project, she said. Let some things just happen. Nyla nodded. Camille was last. They stood across from each other for a moment. I'm going to take a week off posting, Camille said. Just to sit with myself for a minute. Figure out who she is when nobody's watching. She's extraordinary, Nyla said. You'll like her. Camille smiled. The real one. The one she did not show on camera. Then they hugged, and it felt like something reset between them that had been quietly misaligned for a long time. 3 weeks after the trip, Nyla's phone rang on a Tuesday evening while she was at her kitchen table with that same project report open in front of her. She looked at the number. Picked up. You said you would call, she said. I said I would call, Minjae confirmed. I did not specify the timeline. 3 weeks. I was in Seoul. Then Singapore. Then back to Miami. A pause. I thought about calling from all 3 locations. But you waited. I wanted to be somewhere that felt settled when I called you, he said. I am in Atlanta. She sat up slowly. I have a property meeting here Thursday, he said. I arrived early. Another pause, shorter this time. I wondered if you would have dinner with me tomorrow evening. Deliberately. With full awareness on both sides. He used her own words back at her. She looked at the project report on her laptop screen. She closed it. Yes, she said. It was not a perfect story after that. No story worth anything is. There were time zones and full schedules and the very real friction of 2 lives built on different continents trying to find the places they naturally overlapped. There were conversations that required more patience than either of them had on certain days. There were moments of doubt, mostly in Nyla, who had spent so many years being self-sufficient that receiving something felt unfamiliar in her hands. Like an object she kept almost dropping not because she did not want it, but because she was still learning how to hold it. But he was deliberate. Every single time. He did not flood her with grand gestures. He did not try to buy her comfort or impress her with scale. He called when he said he would call. He listened when she talked. He flew to Atlanta 3 times in 2 months for reasons that had nothing to do with business. And slowly, in the way that real things grow, quietly and without performance, something became true between them. The women saw it happen in real time across a group chat that became one of the most entertaining ongoing conversations any of them had ever been part of. Tasha provided live commentary. Simone asked careful questions and seemed genuinely moved by the answers. Eden, who had her own important conversation with Raymond that led to an important decision about their future, was softer and more open about love in general. Camille posted less and called more. She and Nyla talked on the phone twice a week in a way they had not done since their early 20s. Something about the week in Siesta Key had cracked a door open between them that they were both choosing to walk through. 6 months after a summer reunion that was supposed to be simple, Nyla Bennett sat at a restaurant in Atlanta across from a man who had noticed her first because she helped an elderly waitress pick up dropped plates without making it a moment. She was wearing something she liked. Not to impress anyone. He was looking at her in the way he had been looking at her since a beach dinner in Siesta Key. Like, she was the most real thing in the room. She thought about who she had been when she arrived at that villa. Tired. Almost cancelled. Carrying a single black bag with no interest in impressing anyone. She thought about Simone's words. Stop managing your own heart like a project. She thought about Tasha on that first morning, hand across the table, saying don't shrink it down to nothing because you're scared of what it might be. She looked at Minjae across the table and understood something clearly. She had not changed herself to get here. She had not performed or competed or adjusted her personality for the room. She had simply been exactly who she was. And that had been, in the end, the most powerful thing she could have done. And that is where we leave Nyla Bennett. Not at a perfect ending. At a true beginning. Which is always the harder and more beautiful thing. Before you go, here is the lesson I want to leave with you today. Nyla never chased attention. She never shrunk herself down to fit a room or stretched herself out to fill one. She walked into a luxury villa on a Florida beach exactly as she was, plain bag, real laugh, no performance, and she became the person that the most important man in the room could not stop looking for. The lesson is this: the right people will find you inside your authenticity. You do not have to become louder to be heard by the ones who matter. Camille had the following, the image, the presence that entire rooms turned toward. And she still had to sit alone and ask herself why the one person she wanted to notice her had looked past all of it. That is worth thinking about. If this story moved you even slightly, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe if you are new here and want more stories like this.